The one that I think about when I think of startups is really just thinking of like Mr. Wonderful, right, from Shark Tank, because that's something that commercialized the glamour of entrepreneurship, and getting these people with big reputations and big pocketbooks to throw money at something. And I always think of Mr. Wonderful telling you, oh, if you haven't gotten 12 months and you're not getting revenue and this and that, take it out behind the barn and shoot it. And it's one of those things that, like, in some instances, yeah, that's true, but there's also this kind of like being ahead of the curve, right? And I think that that's something that, like, I'm combating with in healthcare, because we're actually getting a ton of traction, but it's been 2 years, actually like 3 years since I started down this journey, and I could have given up a multitude of different times along the way, but it's just something that what I'm doing is so different and so out there compared to what the normal industry standards have been, that it takes special people to really see the vision and then get the first couple clients on and then show the value to the entire system.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Ryan Bass, and today we're going to talk with Ryan a little bit about healthcare regulations and what the regulatory system is, how you are able to monitor the quality or do quality reporting within the healthcare system, how to kind of, in a broader sense, organize and engage your business and managing people, talking a little bit about internal drive and not just sitting around and waiting for direction, and also maybe talk a little bit about persistence and how that leads to success, especially in sales. So should be a great discussion. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Devin. It's great to be back on the podcast.
Absolutely. And for the guests that haven't had a chance to catch or to check it out, Ryan was a guest on the Inventive Journey, which is a sister podcast to this one. So definitely encourage you to go and check out that episode and hear more about Ryan's journey. So now, for those listeners that haven't had a chance to catch up on your journey, just saying, hey, just want know a little bit more about Ryan and then get to the topic at hand, give everybody a quick introduction about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from the Southeast Missouri originally, in the country land. Moved to Kansas City for college and got into healthcare through my first full-time job at Cerner Corporation. Learned and cut my teeth kind of on the regulatory compliance background with CMS, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Moved around to a couple of health systems with my wife doing her residency and now fellowship, and saw a big opportunity in healthcare for innovation that was dearly needed.
No, it makes perfect sense. So now with that as much as introduction and then diving into a bit of the topics at hand. So one of the topics that that we talked about was looking at the healthcare regulatory system and kind of quality reporting and all of that things. Now, not all the guests are going to be in the healthcare or doing reporting or doing those type of things, but kind of give us an idea, why do they require that? What's kind of the background for it, and how is that impactful to people?
Yeah, so I mean, the one thing that most people know is, because everyone's a patient, is that there are electronic health records now within the health systems. That was really made from the Accountable Care Act, which dubbed Obamacare, but giving reimbursements to health systems to implement those EHRs. And really out of the gate, it was a billing mechanism, right? And so that's really the furthest thing along within healthcare is the rev cycle side of things, or the revenue cycle. And so now we're at a unique point in time where we're now starting to be able to focus on the patient, actually. So something that we all kind of anticipated, being an outsider looking at, hey, electronic health records are going to help patient care. That's really not the main driving force, right? It was, how are we making sure that we get every charge for a Tylenol or for ibuprofen? We don't want to give away medications for free when we can charge $40 a pill, right? So at the end of the day, now that we're at this influx with the 21st Century Cures Act and a couple other regulations that have passed, we're able to actually start following up with the patient and starting to set new precedents in how we interact and transform kind of the follow-up of patients. Quality itself as a hospital has waned from a lot of manual, heavy, burdensome free text into an electronic format of discrete data. And so that's one of the focus points of kind of all new healthcare is how do we take away clicks, how do we automate compliance, and how do we generate discrete data that we can do macro analytics on.
Now, yeah, and one of the things that you hit on, which is probably the point that people are aware of, is the electronic health records. Now, I think that if I were to expand that out and kind of, apply that across the field, is a lot of times, whether a lot of different industries, you're looking to, one, maintain quality records, to retain and track information. And then you almost hit on, it really introduces, hey, how do we automate this? How do we make it better? How do we improve it? Both so that it is better quality as far as our records go, and also less labor intensive. And so, taking from the approach of looking at the healthcare system and the regulatory, as well as those kind of records, how do you go about making that a better system? Because one thing, my experience is healthcare tends to be a slow moving organism on some perspectives, especially when you're getting into regulations with the government and how that's going to be monitored. So how do you kind of go about bringing a lot of that into the the 21st century and making that better?
Yeah, I mean, we alone, and we being like independent entrepreneurs are not going to bring health systems to the 21st century overnight, right? Like we're talking about an industry that still heavily relies on beepers and fax machines. And so we got to really look at it from, there's really three main driving forces from a health system perspective. It's what makes you regulatory compliant, what keeps the lights on, and what drives revenue. If you can do all three of those things, you're a slam dunk. But if you can only do one and it's not the first one, you're likely not going to get done. Especially in today's environment with COVID, and you see all the surgical cases and stuff that were canceled that were high earners for health systems, for them to gain a lot of the profit margin to cover some of the I'll say the donations or kind of the nonprofit work that they do in communities, or they might treat patients that don't have insurance and the loss they take on those. So it's kind of set to offset those with the higher margins on the cardiac surgeries and knee replacement, stuff like that. And so really the focal point today is we have a lot of people, right, who work in healthcare, and that's ultimately what is driving healthcare is people. And those people are experiencing different tools and different interactions with different market tools, right? So not necessarily HIPAA compliant, but they're using Amazon, right? So they know how to use an Amazon cart, they know how to follow up, to order things, to kind of interact and interface with these electronic tools. Now it's trying to kind of make the same play available to their job, right? So it's how do we get in, add those three value points, but then also at the same time engage users to where we make the right thing for them to do, the easy thing for them to do.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. So now, kind of with that as a backdrop, and shifting gears just slightly, we one of the other things that we had talked on or hit on as far as kind of along those same lines, but in a broader sense, is how do you kind of organize and engage a business? Which, if you're going to keep records, maintain quality, and also keep that organized, in a general sense, you have to have a business that's both organized and that you have people that are engaged with the business and wanting to get that. In other words, you can have the best systems and automation in place. If everybody hates it and they're not engaged or they're unorganized, it still makes it difficult. So, kind of extracting it out a bit when you're looking at a business and how to kind of either get it organized or keep organization, and also get people to engage in systems that will make things better, but are sometimes learning new systems. How do you even go about starting to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the kind of the key phrase that you used and what I just got done saying. It's the people, right? So at the end of the day, you as a founder or you as a co-founder of a small group of a cohort of people who are starting down a path to answer a problem with a solution, it really comes down to the people that you're doing it with. So if you have multiple co-founders and two of them are disengaged or only kind of hanging out, you're not going to get as far as if everybody's pulling in the same direction. So it's really about trying to really captivate your entire thought and vision of not what am I doing today, but what am I doing 3 years, what am I doing 5 years from now. And then as we kind of go down that roadmap, it's finding people who see that vision with you and see the impact that you can make, not only for like, your shareholders or those people who are investing in the business, but also like the key demographic. So in healthcare, like we're focused on our side on how do we automate process? How do we, save money for health systems? That's all good and fine. But at the end of the day, we're also looking at how do we ensure that we're giving the best possible outcomes for patients? How are we giving the most information that we can to a provider to treat that patient as fully as possible? Or how can we give macro level, data to a health system to make the best health decision for a patient with data-driven decisions? And so we're pioneering into a new area where there's nothing to like hang your hat on and say, we're like them and this is what they do and we do something very similar. We're going into an area where it's like, yeah, there's something similar to us in another industry or another part, but nothing in this space. So you got to kind of see the vision of where we're going. And it's getting those clients engaged and getting them bought on, getting your people engaged and bought on. And so then it's like, putting the processes in place. So we're dealing with that right now. Between domain strategy and maintenance and updates and pushing new functionality. How are we doing that? What's the process? What are the steps? But at the same time, since we're so small, we don't want to put a bunch of red tape in, right? We don't want to say, all right, we have 6 different platforms and you got to go here to get approval and I have to click here. It's like, we're less than 20 people. Just text me, call me, email me. Like let's move this along as quickly as possible. Since we're so small, we're still able to be flexible and fluent without cutting our nose off to bite our face. You know what I mean?
No, that makes perfect sense. I think the biggest one and the one that I've had to learn is that, a lot of it is going back to what you hit on, which is the people. And if you can get them bought in and saying, the merits and why it makes sense to adopt a new system or to improve a system that's already there and otherwise get that in place, makes it a lot easier, and vice versa. If you're not able to get that buy-in, then it can make it a pretty difficult road in order, no matter how good of systems or automations you have in place. So kind of on that note, and it's kind of the getting people to get engaged in within the business. I mean, that's part of it is management, what this job is, how it's set up, and part of it is finding the right people, giving them the right direction, and letting them doing it. But how do you kind of go about when you're looking at managing people and finding those people with internal drive that aren't just going to sit around and wait for instructions, but are going to actually proactively go out and look to improve the system or make it better? Any thoughts on how you go about kind of approaching that?
I mean, it's a lot of guess and check work, but it's really just empowering those people. So I tell everyone that I hire that I don't hire like people that I need to micromanage. I hire professionals. And until you give me a reason to not trust you and not let you kind of like go out on your own, then we don't have a problem, right? And so the goal is I hired someone in February that was the first hire of the company. She had some background in healthcare sales, but no one has background in the vertical I'm going, right? So I'm pioneering this space. So it's not like I can plug and play and get somebody from a quasi competitor and they come in and they have a lot of knowledge. So it was me sitting there and empowering her, giving her more information, sitting with her, talking to her, getting her comfortable to where she could then start leading the calls with clients, right? And so like I was talking to her this morning and it was like, yeah, about 3 to 4 months in, you started becoming more comfortable with the message and what we're doing and how we're doing it. So then she would start leading those calls and I would be there for color commentary if, something within the messaging she skipped or there was an extra point that could be made. And then now we're to the point, 6 months in where she's being able to take some of those intro calls by herself. And so it's really letting her go out and do that, but then also preparing her for future steps, right? So not just stopping and getting comfortable, because everybody who gets comfortable, if you're a high performance individual, if you get comfortable, you get bored and then you'd want to quit. So like my goal is finding these high performers, working with them, empowering them to be kind of at the top level they can, but then giving next steps and goals that are attainable and tangible that can kind of be that next step in their career and their next responsibilities and kind of build those people, as opposed to what I've experienced in the past. And what I know a lot of people get frustrated with is you're really good at this job, we can't let you go anywhere else because no one else could do as good of job as you are in this spot. And so
Mm.
that pigeonholes people, they become unhappy, then they leave and you have to fill two spots then, right?
No, I think that definitely makes sense. And now, kind of one I think is identifying the right people. Now, maybe just to throw it in the opposite direction, if you're getting those people and you give them the opportunity and the chance, and ones if you have. So backing up, it's sometimes hard to or on the front end, and as you kind of said, a little bit of guess and check is to identify the people that are going to have that internal drive, that are going to go out and want to build that the system, make it better, and otherwise go about doing what they need to do, and not waiting for direction. But how do you go about, as you're hiring people and bringing them on, kind of identifying who are those people that have that drive, or kind of what are the indicators, and also how do you make the decision, hey, they don't have it and we got to let them go? Kind of any thoughts on that?
I mean, what I've found is like people with an athletic team background are people who normally have kind of like that high, especially if they played sports at like a higher level, like they understand the demands and like the expectations from the rest of the team. Like, my background is soccer and I was the last line as a goalkeeper and, as a two-time All-American, but like I didn't get to be that because I just hung out and didn't work hard and didn't do things outside of practice to then help solidify the team going forward, right? So there's a level of dedication and determination that comes into it of, hey, we have practice from 8 to 10, but if that's all you're doing, you're not going to be great, right? You're only going to be a mediocre to average player. Whereas if you're saying like, all right, it's 8 to 10, but I'll stay extra and do shooting, I'll go do this workout, I'll do this running at night, I'll do that, then you're helping build yourself, which ultimately improves the team. So the high performers are ones that you can really pick out, and it's such a small company.
Mm,
It's something where you can easily compare, right? You can see the work that's being put in from one person to another. But when you get bigger and bigger, that's where you rely on your leaders and your management team that you've empowered to start picking those things out. But I'm also a big believer that like there are people who are like, I guess, lesser performers, but it's not because they want to be, right? I don't think anybody wakes up, gets out of bed and goes, I can't wait to go do bad at my job today, right? Like you have to really be in a bad mental state to like have that mindset of I'm going to go screw up today.
mm,
So it really comes down to like empowering those people and finding out what the problem is, because every person is different in how you relate to stress, how you perform, what hours you work best, how you can best convey your thoughts. Some are visual, some are analytical. So like you really have to engage the person as they are and try to see what are the barriers and see if we can remove those. Ultimately, there still are instances where it just doesn't work out and you
mm.
kind of cut the cord there. But you really want to engage with those people, let your thoughts be known and be clear, give them an opportunity to give feedback and try to find a mitigation point, especially for someone who's been around the company for a while. You got to think that when you fire or let them go and they leave, you lose a lot of know-how. Even if they
Mm.
were low performing, like they've been around for 9 months and you hire in someone new that has no idea of everything that's been going on for the last 9 months. Now you got to kind of get them ramped up and back up to speed. And that's a cost that you're accruing where they're not really doing anything positive. In the long run, it might be good, but it's still a thing to consider when you're hiring and firing people.
No, I think that definitely makes sense, and certainly would agree with that. So awesome. Well, now as we've kind of gone through that area, one of the other ones that you'd hit on that I always think is I think it's a fundamental factor in success of a lot of startups and small businesses is the idea of, almost persistence to success. And now, one of the things we talked a little bit about before was, closing sales is often based on persistence. But I think that as a general thing, there's a lot of different areas that if you're persistent at it, it'll make the difference between being a success within your chosen field or career or your business versus those that are going to give up. But it is always a balance of how long do you persist versus when do you cut the cord. So how do you kind of find that ability to be persistent and, maybe within the sales context, especially when people are giving you the nose or they're or it's not working out or it's not going the direction you want it to go?
Yeah, I think people look at persistence, and depending on the use case of that depends on if it's positive, light, or negative. And I mean, one of the things that people always think of persistence as sales, as you mentioned, but there's a lot of other persistent areas that you can be to grow relationships that aren't necessarily sales driven today, but could lead to sales in the future or lead to more success in your business just from creating a relationship, right?
Mm,
So there are, I won't say countless, but there's a quite a few different relationships that I have now within the industry, to where the first time I reached out to them, they didn't respond, or they said, I'm busy, or yeah, I'm not at this time. And, I keep coming back, keep coming back. And, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, finally I'll meet with you. I'll look at what you're doing. I'll listen to what you have to say. You outline it. And they're like, man, I'm glad that you were persistent in this like approach to me, because like I see the value, I see what you're working on, I see how it aligns to like what I believe and how this should be done, and how I think what you're doing is a better approach than what the industry is looking at. And so you start gaining those allies. And
mm,
once you gain a relationship like that, like it may not lead to a dollars and cents sale right out of the bat, but you never know who that person knows, or who that person, maybe that person comes available because they hate their job and they want to come free, and they have an immense amount of experience and they align with what you want to do, and now they want to work with you. And so
mm.
you start looking at persistence, and it's really just a daily mindset, right? It's not necessarily an action that you're taking to do a reminder to follow up. It's a, hey, I have a goal and I have a vision, and I'm getting out of bed today, and I'm going to make, 1 to 2 to 3 steps, no matter how crappy I feel. I'm going to
Mm.
make 3 steps down this journey today and get in touch with these people, or get feedback from this person, or, take the next steps with somebody else. So all of those things that we kind of like compartmentalize persistence into are really contained with that will and that mindset every day when you wake up.
No, I think that definitely it makes perfect sense, and it's a great thoughts and takeaways. So, well, now as we're starting to wrap towards the end of the episode and had a great discussion, I always like to wrap up each episode with the same question at the end of each, or at the end. So we'll jump to that now. So the question I always like to ask is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Um, I guess the biggest myth is that I mean, if we're looking at startups, are you looking at healthcare or startups?
I'll let you choose.
I mean, the one that I think about when I think of startups is really just thinking of like Mr. Wonderful, right, from Shark Tank, because that's something that commercialized the glamour of entrepreneurship, and getting these people with big reputations and big pocketbooks to throw money at something. And I always think of Mr. Wonderful telling you, oh, if you haven't gotten 12 months and you're not getting revenue and this and that, take it out behind the barn and shoot it. And it's one of those things that, like, in some instances, yeah, that's true, but there's also this kind of like being ahead of the curve, right?
Mm,
And I think that that's something that like I'm combating with in healthcare, because we're actually getting a ton of traction, but it's been 2 years, two, or actually like 3 years since I started down this journey, and I could have given up, a multitude of different times along the way. But it's just something that what I'm doing is so different and so out there compared to what the normal industry standards have been,
mm,
that it takes special people to really see the vision and then get the first couple clients on, and then show the value to the entire system. So, it's something that doesn't happen overnight, and healthcare is a very slow adopter. Like I mentioned, beepers and fax machines are running rampant.
mm.
So, I mean, that's the kind of like little kernel that I would give to anyone else watching this who's doing that entrepreneur journey in the industry. It's like, you want to be able to be someone who will, quote unquote, fail fast. And if it's not working, then get out and find something that you can exit. But there are different kinds of entrepreneurs that are either martyrs or mercenaries. And you got to find out who you want to be and what your industry requires. And, you know, strap in for the long haul if the martyrdom is, is what is needed.
No, I think that's a great takeaway, great myth to dispel, and definitely makes perfect sense. So, well, as we now wrap things up, or wrap up the episode anyway, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach you, contact you, find out more?
Either on LinkedIn, or you can email us at info@carrier.com, CAREIER.com.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect, and otherwise take advantage of some great experience. And if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now for all of you listeners, if you have if you could help us to share this expertise, we'd definitely appreciate it. You can do so by clicking share, subscribe, and leave us a review. And then we'll be able to share even this expertise with even more startups and small businesses to help them on their way to success. And with that, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin.